Hey guys, Nike here. I did the video last week on the Power DPS Berserker, and everyone seemed to like that. I have been enjoying that build quite a bit. However, I do realize that most players that are playing Warrior in raids or fractals will not get to be playing a DPS build. Their groups are going to want them to run banners. And with that being the case, I did mention how to modify the DPS build into a banner build in that video, but it wasn't really complete and wasn't really thorough. And the rotation is slightly different for the banner build. So I thought I would do a full banner warrior guide so people that are just looking for that can get that without having to do the math and sift through the stuff in the other video. This will be coming from the basis that you haven't seen that other video and totally from scratch for the Power Banner Berserker. On a personal note, I have really enjoyed playing this build. I did a full clear and a couple pug runs with this build. Even using it on bosses where normally Condi Warrior is a lot better, like Matthias, and I still had a lot of fun playing it. This is probably the most fun I've had playing Warrior in a very long time, in fact. So I'm super glad that this is a good build and that it's definitely acceptable. Now, to be perfectly clear, if you wanted to min-max and play absolute best thing, you would want to be able to switch between Power and Condi, depending on which boss you were fighting. But with that being out of the reach of a lot of players, especially newer players who can only have one build, like I said, I played this on a boss like Matthias, which is probably the least applicable boss for Power, and it was perfectly fine, and I did perfectly fine DPS. So I don't see any problem with you playing this on every boss if that's all you got. So yeah, I enjoy playing it. You will enjoy playing it. So enjoy this guide. Thanks, guys. All right, gear for the Banner Berserker Warrior. The weapons and armor are going to be full Berserker with Rune of the Scholar, and then your weapons are going to be using Sigil of Force and Sigil of Accuracy on each side. This is the simplest loadout, straight Berserker Scholar and Force Accuracy. I know that other people will be recommending Thief runes, but and with Impact Sigil on the weapons. However, I don't feel that the DPS difference is big at all, and in fact, I think there's a lot of scenarios where the DPS on a Scholar loadout is going to be significantly better, so I'm recommending Accuracy Sigil and Scholar runes. Additionally, other people are recommending just going pure Axe. I do not believe that that is the best DPS option. There is no reason why using the Greatsword on swap would be worse. And in fact, I believe that it is indeed better. So I would recommend that you use the Greatsword on swap. The exception to that would be if you're on a boss where you must bring a lot of CC, then it might be worth learning the Pure Axe version and keeping Mace on swap so that you can swap to Mace for the CC when needed. However, we will talk about other things you can do in order to bring extra CC later on in the guide, so that may not be necessary even with Greatsword. So, again, I believe that the Accuracy and Scholar setup with Greatsword on swap is the superior setup compared to the Thief Rune Pure Axe version. So enough about that. Let's talk about the trinkets. Our back piece is going to be Berserker. We will have one Berserker earring, one Assassin earring. So one earring is Berserker, one earring is Assassin. Our amulet should be Assassin, and then our rings should both be Assassin. So we have Lots of Assassin's pieces, 2 rings, an amulet, and 1 earring will be Assassins. This will get us on our axe set. What you want to look for unbuffed is 65.71% crit chance on your hero panel. If you're in a level 80 zone and you have no buffs on you, that is the number that you are hoping to see. If you do not have that number, then you have missed something somewhere with your Assassins and Berserker mix. So that's basically it for the gear. Let's move on. Alright, traits and skills. First, we're going to go with Strength, then Discipline, and then Berserker. So in Strength, at the Adept level, you'll notice we're not using Peak Performance. Peak Performance is actually a DPS loss with this build. So it is very cool, and that's one of the reasons why, instantly why I've enjoyed playing this so much, is you don't have to bother with Peak Performance. You don't have any skills on your utility bar that are stupid, like Throw Bolus, that don't do anything. Everything on your utility bar is there because you want it there. Okay, so we're going to take Brave Stride. Your first strike when entering combat grants stability. Now you might say, well, that doesn't help us because usually we start the fight with Headbutt, and that's going to stun us, and then we get the stability after, so it's completely useless. Not entirely true. What you can do when you go into a raid fight is use Throw Axe to initiate the combat. So before you get into melee range of the boss to Headbutt, you can do a Throw Axe to get your stack of stability, and then follow that up with the Headbutt and avoid the self-stun. And that is a great way to make use of this trait to avoid that self-stun at the start of combat and make sure that your damage ramps up as fast as it should. At the major level, we take Forceful Greatsword. You guys are all very well familiar with Forceful Greatsword and how good that is. And then Berserker's Power, the tried and true warrior staple. That needs no introduction for you warrior players. Discipline, we are going to go with Warrior Sprint for that fat 7% DPS increase. Doubled standards to give us the super sweet bonuses to our stats when we use banners, which we of course use. And then at the GM level, we take Axe Mastery because Axe Mastery is kick-ass. Then in Berserker, we are going to take Smash Brawler, which is going to give us 5 seconds extra of Berserk mode. Very good stuff. Blood Reaction, which is going to gain us a percentage. It's going to give us ferocity based on a percentage of our precision. So we definitely want lots of that precision to make use of that. And then Bloody Roar to give us the 20% damage boost while in Berserk. One thing I will say about this build is that Bloody Roar does appear to be bugged, and I've heard from reliable sources that it is indeed bugged and is not giving us as much damage as it should. It is giving us 20% damage, but it's giving it to us additively rather than multiplicatively. Every other buff in the game, like Berserker's Power or Warrior Sprint, is multiplicative. This one, for some reason, is bugged and is additive. The devs do apparently know about it, and they're working on a fix. I don't know what patch that fix is going to ship in, but it will be fixed, and so you can look forward to gaining another 1k DPS on your warrior numbers once that is fixed. The good news is, right now, this build is only about 1k behind the Condi Warrior build on a Golem. So once this is fixed, it'll be almost virtually identical to Condi Warrior on the Golem, and then you will get a really nice sense of parity there, and it will really come down to which one you like to play most and which boss you're fighting to determine which one you choose to use. So moving on to skills, we are going to take Blood Reckoning. I know some other rotations do not use Blood Reckoning that I've seen posted on Reddit and various places on YouTube. Blood Reckoning is too good not to use, so the build must use it. Next, Signet of Might. It gives us 180 power. It doesn't really need much explanation of how good it is. Some people might say, well, why not run Signet of Fury instead and then leave off some of the Assassin's pieces, or I'm sorry, why not run Signet of Fury and turn some of those Assassin's pieces back into Berserker? It just works out that you can't really find a happy mix with the Signet of Accuracy. With the Sigil of Accuracy, what you'd end up having to do is turning the Sigil of Accuracy into Impact, and then changing a bunch of gear around, and it turns out to be less DPS anyway. So Signet of Might is there to stay. Banners, do not need any introduction on that. Banners are great. And then lastly is Headbutt, which is how we start our rotation to give us the adrenaline to get things going. Most people that have played Kandi Berserker are used to that, and this is our standard bar. So earlier I mentioned that there is indeed something you can do to bring more CC. Signet of Might is by far the most optional skill on our bar. If you are at a fight like Samurag, where CC is crucially important, or Slothosaur, you can change it to Wild Blow. Wild Blow will give you a great deal of CC. It's probably one of the best CC skills in the game, based on its cooldown and what it does, and you're in good shape with that. Additionally, Wild Blow is a pretty good damage skill in and of itself. It hits really, really hard. So if you were to, in fact, use Wild Blow, but then forget about it and still keep it on your bar for the next boss, you're not losing so much because it still does add a bit of damage. Not as much as Signet of Might, but it's not a total waste of space like something like Kick would be, or something like that. Plus, it also extends your Berserk mode since it's a rage skill, which we like, and it extends it by 3 seconds, which is pretty good. So all in all, you definitely want to, on high CC bosses, again, swap to Wild Blow. Yeah, that is very straightforward, and that is the skills and traits for the warrior. Got a couple more things to talk about before we get into the rotation, and we'll cover that right next. Alright, so the next thing to talk about is buff food. Most players who have been around a while don't need me to explain this, but I want to make the guide fairly comprehensive, so let's talk about it. First up, if you have Spotter in your group, if the Druid is in your subgroup, then you will take bowl of sweet and spicy butternut squash soup as your food of choice. If you do not have the Druid in your sub-squad and you are not going to get Spotter as a result, you want to use a bowl of curry butternut squash soup. The benefit to curry butternut squash is it's quite a bit cheaper. So if you're a cheapskate, you might prefer to have the Druid be in the other group. But if you're looking to min-max and get the best DPS numbers that you can, you want to be in the Druid group and be using sweet and spicy. For your utility food, potent superior sharpening stones is really, really good, and I highly recommend those. However, if you are in a group with competent healers, if you trust your healers to keep up scholar bonus, which hopefully you do, and you have lots of gold to burn, Writ of Masterful Strength will be a slightly more DPS than the potent sharpening stones. But again, if you're in a group with kind of questionable healing skills, then Writ of Masterful Strength is not going to be so great for you, and you're going to want to default back to the sharpening stones. But again, let's say you're in a group with a really good Druid and a heal Ellie, you're going to have really good scholar uptime. So if money is no object and you want the absolute best DPS that you can push out, Writ of Masterful Strength is the way to go. So that is it for buff food. Let's talk about the rotation. So one thing that I really want to get into, talk about before we get into the rotation itself, is just sort of the philosophy behind it and what I think makes a rotation fun. I've actually had a debate with people about this, and they actually had a different position, which I didn't think anyone would. But for me, what makes a rotation fun is whether it loops cleanly. I do not want a rotation where it changes every time you go through it. I want it to form a perfect loop where it's the same every single time you do the rotation. And you can just kind of get into a flow state while you're playing where you don't even have to look at your skill bar at all. You don't even have to glance at it, because you know, as long as your alacrity stays up, exactly what button presses you have to do and when. And you only need to glance down at your bar if there's like an invuln phase on a boss, or if you have to go do a mechanic or something goes wrong like that, or you have to stop and res somebody. But ideally, you want a rotation that forms a loop. At least I do. I know there's other players who prefer rotations where they just have skill priority and they just click the best skill they have on cooldown, and they don't think about a loop. Whatever floats your boat. What floats my boat, again, like I said, is looping rotations. So with that said, I'm very happy with the way that the Banner Berserker plays. The rotation loops perfectly and is infinitely repeatable. So I have no trouble recommending it to players, and I think it's super fun, and it gets to use all the fun warrior skills. It gets to use Axe 5, it gets to use Decapitate, it gets to use Arc Divider, and it gets to use 100 Blades. In my opinion, as a veteran warrior player, those are the most fun skills to use, and I'm glad that this rotation gets to use them. So let's get into it, and I will do a slow motion rotation and tell you what the skill order is and all that, and you can use it sort of as a reference. So anyway, stay tuned. Let's do it. All right, so we're going to lead with Headbutt. Remember, I said you could lead with Axe 3 to prevent the self-stun. I didn't do it here, but you can. After Headbutt, we Berserk, Decapitate, and then Axe 5. After the Axe 5, we're going to Decapitate again. And then Axe 2 and Axe 3. Decapitate again. Now we're going to use Blood Reckoning. Decapitate again. And then use Axe 4, Axe 3, Decapitate again. And then Axe 2. After the Axe 2, swap to Greatsword and immediately Arc Divider. And then 100 Blades. After 100 Blades, we're going to Blade Trail. And then Arc Divider. And then back to Axe for an Axe 5. And then after the Axe 5, we're going to Decapitate. Axe 2. Axe 3. One last Decapitate. And then Axe 4. And then Axe 3. Swap back to Greatsword. 100 Blades. As you can see, Berserk is over. After the 100 Blades, Axe 4. And then Rush. And then we're going to do a Greatsword auto chain, a second Greatsword auto chain, swap to Axe, Axe 2, Axe 3, and then Berserk, and you can repeat the rotation again, and it will go just like that, and the rotation is endlessly repeatable. One thing you can do slightly different, although I find it doesn't make a huge difference, is when you're not in Berserk, instead of doing that second Greatsword auto chain, you can go back to Axe and do an Axe auto chain. It doesn't make a great deal of difference, but that is an option, and the rotation works to be the same. But I find for my own internal timing in my head, it works better if I can do the second Greatsword chain and know that everything will be ready for me in Axe when I go. But again, like I said, the rotation loops infinitely. You can just do this rotation every time. You don't have to worry about a skill running out of cooldown. and yeah, it works pretty straightforwardly. So when people are going to ask what numbers should you expect on the Golem, I think what would be reasonable to expect, it would be somewhere for a player who's newer to the game to get about 26k, and then a player who's a hardcore Golem grinder who's really, really good at benchmarks can probably get high 28s or low 29s for this setup. But yeah, somewhere in that range between 26 and 29 is what you're going to hope to get with the meta buffs. So that's what you want to aim for. But anyway, that is the rotation, and if you have any questions about that, hit me up in the comments below. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is it. That is the updated Power Berserker Banner Warrior Guide. It has been a very long time since I have made a Power Berserker banner build video, maybe all the way back to the HOT days when this was last something that I did. So I'm very happy that got to do it again. I'm glad that the balance changes has gone in that direction, and I'm glad that not only is it good again, but it's fun to play. So it really is checking all the boxes for me and making me really in a good place with where Warrior is. So anyway, guys, that is it for me. I hope you enjoy it. If you have any comments or questions, hit me up below. Otherwise, reach me on Twitter, Twitch, etc. You know, all that stuff. Anyway, guys, thanks. Have a great day.